Forget all you know about podcasts. We welcome you to an experience uniquely different. Please join us for our coverage of all entertainment on the fringe of society. The candles are lit, the lights are down low. It is now time to welcome our host as he steps up to the pulpit. The sacrifice has been prepared for the midnight black mass.
Groovy ghoulies! How the hell are ya? The maniacal minister of the occult, the reverend, the dragon, the devil you know, Dan Wilson here for another edition of the Midnight Black Mass. Thank you very much for joining us here at youtube.com/pottyhumor or on iTunes or Stitcher at the Potty Humor channel or on the Beyond Ringside Radio Network at beyondringside.com. We really appreciate the feedback we've been getting. You can keep sending it my way at Dragons Rejects on Twitter. And just thank you for being along for the ride. It's been fantastic. It's been full of thrills, chills, and spills. And tonight, quite possibly the most informative episode in the history of the Midnight Black Mass when it comes to the world of professional wrestling. Our guest, the legendary pro wrestling trainer, wrestler, former world tag team champion, featured on MTV, True Life, I Want to Be a Wrestler. Ladies and gentlemen, Les Thatcher is going to be our guest tonight. One of the true greats, and as far as pro wrestling training, there's probably not a more respected trainer in all of the industry. He's also one of the greatest announcers of all time. We're going to get into all of that. He really gives us a wrestling lesson of a lifetime. Tonight he's going to be talking about the upcoming camp he's got down at Deep Southern Championship Wrestling, which there's still a few spots available, so you want to go to dscw.org for more information about that. So, starting off the show this week with a little bit of tragic news, and I figure we'd go ahead and get it out of the way and move along towards positivity, but I think these folks are worth remembering, and we'll get a little bit more of that in the Les Thatcher interview, but of course, Robin Williams, the death of the famous actor, rocking the world of entertainment. Pretty much anyone with something positive to say about the impact that Mr. Williams had on their lives. What I can he wasn't my favorite actor, but I loved his work at times. It's not somebody that I would list in my top 10 influences, but I can't think of a time that I ever disliked the man, and there's some very fond memories of my life that involved him back to when I was a small kid watching Mork and Mindy reruns with my mom. She let me stay up late. Feel like it was special. We used to watch that stuff on Nick at Night. And it was one of my favorite shows when I was a very small child, like 3 or 4 years old. And then, of course, if you were a young kid or a teen or a preteen in the 90s, then a lot of his big hits then. Hook comes to mind, as does Good Morning Vietnam and What Dreams May Come. All of those were big movies for people of my age. Like a lot of folks a little bit older were more familiar with his coke-addled stand-up stuff. A lot of the people older than me, maybe, when he started getting into the more mainstream stuff. But anyway, just as always, just want to send our respect to any entertainer. And that's actually part of the Rev's rant tonight. So I'm not done talking about Mr. Williams, but there's a couple of other folks I want to acknowledge. Learned that a former NWA Wildside star, a former WCW developmental prospect, and New Japan Pro Wrestling star, a man who I knew several years ago, hadn't talked to him in a long time, but definitely considered him a friend at that point. A gentleman by the name of Troy Endress, he wrestled as Omen, apparently was involved in a very serious car accident on I-75 in Atlanta, and he passed away as a result of that, and I was just very saddened to hear that. My old Wildside broadcast partner, Stephen Prazak, notified me on Facebook that a man by that name had passed away, and by the time I'd gotten back to him, he'd said he'd confirmed with Disco Inferno and a couple of other people that would know that it indeed was Troy Omen Endress. He apparently had a stint in New Japan after he left us, where he was doing a new version of the Great Muta, and I'm not really sure what happened. He was a big guy, man. He was in some shape. His wrestling was very green. You know, he didn't very experienced at that time, but man, he looked like a star. He was tan, he was muscular, and his bleach blonde hair. What I remember the most about him, and he didn't make a lot of Wildside television because there was a limit to how much of those guys we could show at that time. But he had this move called the Bad Omen. And if any of the fans from the old Friday night days remember that, he was there dropping somebody on that ass with the Bad Omen every single week. It started out in like a power slam position. And he would swing them around and their legs would go all the way to the side, and he would bring them down into like a rock bottom position, or a uranagi, as it's known, from its original name, where it originated in Japan. That move was later popularized by Chris Harris as the catatonic when he was part of America's Most Wanted in TNA. But to my knowledge, in the United States, Troy Endress was the first man to do that move, and he was a very nice guy, and man, I hate to hear that. So, you know, you never know on this strange road in wrestling, man. You run into all these cool people. You forge this bond of brotherhood. That's one thing I like about doing these podcasts is you get to call up some of these guys and talk to them and check on them and see how they're doing. You always like to hear when they're doing well, like Luke Hawks a few weeks ago, and very saddened when something tragic happens to one of them, and that's what happened to Omen. And so we give the old 10-bell salute here from the Midnight Black Mass to Mr. Troy Omen Endress. And also the wrestling world lost one of the true great journeymen, a highly respected wrestler, one of the men who was very influential on the career of a young Ricky Morton, was always considered a great man and a great hand in the ring. Mr. Ken Lucas passed away, and as always when you lose a member of this fraternity, it's only worth your time to acknowledge him. And so, but Mr. Les Thatcher later on tonight is going to talk about Ken Lucas, I'm told, and he's going to talk about it in a way that I just possibly couldn't because I wasn't there, and he was. So look forward to that. Going to be awesome. My heart goes out to the families and the friends of all of these people. You always hate it when the world loses people who were able to entertain and put smiles on faces, and that's certainly all three of those men I mentioned would fit that description. So, but on to more positive news. Onward and upward, man. Life goes on, and God, it sucks, but you got to move forward, and sometimes you lose those really close to you, and sometimes you lose those that only had a fleeting impact on your life, but saddened nonetheless. So moving on to more positive news. You can catch me out on the road. Empire Wrestling returns August the 16th, August the 23rd, in Rossville, Georgia, and Chattanooga, Tennessee, respectively, on the 16th. That's this Saturday night. Going to be back at the Empire Arena. Going to be doing another live Midnight Black Mass. The Strong Style Psycho Tank will be my guest live on the Midnight Black Mass this Saturday in Rossville, Georgia. And then on the 23rd, Empire Wrestling will be moving to Chattanooga, Tennessee at the D1 Sports Complex that's owned by NFL great Peyton Manning. It's going to feature Gunnar Miller, the former UTC linebacker. Gotten a lot of press about his recent trip to the NXT camp, and he's one of those college athletes that WWE has been scouting heavily. And he's getting some of his early in-ring work there with Empire. It's actually a trainee of the seven-figure deal, Ace Rockwell, who will also be on the card. The Temptation, Sean Tempers, the Empire Heavyweight Champion, and myself, the Reverend, with another live Midnight Black Mass, all going to be appearing on August 23rd in Chattanooga, Tennessee at the D1 Sports Complex. You can follow them on Twitter at D1 Chats, that's C-H-A-T-T, and you can follow Empire at EmpirePW. On August the 29th, that's a Friday, 7 p.m. bell time, I will be making my annual trek to Atlanta, Georgia for the largest sci-fi and fantasy convention in the country, Dragon Con 2014. For Dragon Con Championship Wrestling. You can get more information at Dragon Con on Twitter. The ticket's going to run you about $50 for a one-day pass. I believe it's about $150 for the whole weekend. Well worth it. Stars aplenty. from all over TV, film, comic books, horror movies, whatever. Anything that you could think of, animation. Everybody from the voice of motherfucking Goofy to James Gunn, the director of Guardians of the Galaxy, to Ralph motherfucking Macchio is going to be there, and you need to be there too. That's Friday, August the 29th, 7 p.m. bell time. Don't want to miss it. Dragon Con 2014. And then on Sunday, August the 31st, I will be returning to Deep Southern Championship Wrestling as they invade Red Bank, Tennessee at the TWE Arena. Got a great card there, headlined by the former NWA World Tag Team Champions and true blue wrestling legends themselves, the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson. They're going to be taking on up-and-coming tag team standouts, The Movement, and I'll be there with the Strong Style Psycho Tank in tow and going to be looking for a fight and a good time on August the 31st in Red Bank, Tennessee. Be back in Red Bank on October 26th. The same arena, TWE Arena, for the AIWF National Showcase. That's a 3 p.m. event. I've been contracted to do the play-by-play on that, so looking forward to getting to see a lot of talent from a lot of different states and all over the country. See what's coming up there. A lot of these guys are maybe the next future guys that you're going to see making waves in the bigger promotions. It's especially on the independents. So looking forward to being there on October the 26th. That's also a Sunday at 3 p.m. And what I tell you about them October dates, they was going to start filling up fast, and they are. So you better get in while the getting's good. If you want the Reverend and the Devil's Rejects, I'm available as a manager. I'm available as an announcer. I can do anything and everything you want in terms of that administrative capacity. So you definitely want to hit me up if you need to improve the quality of what you're doing out there. That's that's rather dragonsrejects@gmail.com for booking information. Okay, time for the Revs rant. We got a couple of minutes here. We're going to run over the hour, it looks like, but that's okay. Les Thatcher went right at the 45-minute timeline that I give for the weekly interviews, so it's going to be good. Revs rant. Sometimes it's just better to keep your mouth shut. When you start making angry blanket statements, you unintentionally alienate those you did not intend to. That's just a bit of social media etiquette, and it can apply to wrestling, certainly, but I think just humanity in general would be a lot better dealing with things in that manner. You never know what somebody's thinking. The whole thing with the suicide issue that's come up after Robin Williams' passing, everyone seems to be an expert on suicide, whether on the pro or the con side, or is it a mental illness, is it not? My answer is you don't know what's going on in somebody else's head. You don't know where they've been, what they've been through, or have ever in any way been in their shoes. You may have had a similar journey yourself, and more power to you for getting through it. More power to you for not giving up and hanging in there. But you can't possibly be that person that had to take that ultimate step. No matter what was going on in their life, it was so bad that they felt that suicide was the only option. And that's not something that people should take lightly, and I think they are. And lots of people making angry blanket statements about that and other things just that are going on in the news, and whether it be religion, whether it be politics. Not that it's not good to have your own opinions, because it is, but you really need to be careful how you word stuff, people, because I know I have very dear friends that just, let's say for an example, may get angry about something and mouth off and say all so-and-sos deserve to die, and fuck them, and they're worthless, and they have no value to humanity whatsoever. But maybe they don't know that someone they love or trust or respect actually has that opinion, but just didn't bother to share it, because unlike some of these people, they don't have to put every fucking thought that goes through their head on social media or wear it on their sleeve. So you create this unnecessary tension or disdain, or even for the people that see it and just say, oh, that person's just being them, you're still planting that seed in the back of their mind that deep down you've got a problem with them, even though you're supposed to be friends. So, just food for thought on the Revs Rant. It's not like I'm holier than thou in that respect, or not that I am even not guilty of doing that from time to time, but just an open dialogue to say, hey, let's all watch kind of how we address things, because you never know who's been affected. In terms of the suicide, actually, we in my family have been dealing with a very tough situation. My sister's best friend committed suicide a couple of months ago, and it's been very difficult on her. It's probably been the most trying experience of her life, and she's had to reach out to the family for a lot of support. And like I say, you just don't know what's going through somebody's head. You're not in their shoes, so you don't have to be such a sanctimonious fucking prick about shit. You don't have to. Not everything is about you being right. Sometimes bad shit just happens, and sometimes you got to let people deal with that how they got to deal with it. That's all I got to say this week on the Revs Rant. Coming up after the break, the legendary Les Thatcher will be joining the program to give us all an education on Pro Wrestling 101. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Midnight Black Mass.
Whether you're having an autograph session, personal appearance, or live event, we got just the person you need to contact for all of those needs. SBI Bookings is home of some of the best stars in the wrestling industry today. They provide you with the best talent this business has to offer, from Kevin Nash, Larry Zbyszko, Scott Steiner, and many, many more. So who will you contact next time you're planning an event? The men of SBI Bookings. Check them out at sbibookings.com.
You are listening to the Midnight Black Mass, and it's time for us to pay some bills. You know where to get your official Midnight Black Mass merchandise? Look no further than midnightblackmass.spreadshirt.com. We have all sizes available, men's and women's shirts. We have Midnight Black Mass t-shirts, #reject t-shirts. We have Get Ya Pulls coffee mugs. We have Potty Humor t-shirts, all supporting the Potty Humor Network at youtube.com/pottyhumor or facebook.com/pottyhumor. We also thank you for joining us on the Beyond Ringside Radio Network, where you can catch the Midnight Black Mass with a brand new episode Sunday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern Time at beyondringside.com. The rest of their weekly schedule looks like this: Beyond Ringside Live Sundays at 6:30 p.m., Back to Basics Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, The To Be Determined Show, hosted by Wicked Nemesis, Wednesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern. Beyond Ringside Saturday Showcase, Saturdays at 11 a.m. Eastern. Cause and Effect, Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. And Wrestle Rage at Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern. All on BeyondRingside.com. Wrestling, MMA, sports talk radio, and more. 24/7 sports talk, not your traditional sports talk station. They feature live original programming and interviews throughout the week, and replays of those broadcasts 24/7. That's beyondringside.com.
Wrestling fans, Anarchy Wrestling television tapings are the second and fourth Saturdays of every month at 4236 Level Grove Road in Cornelia, Georgia. For more information on Anarchy Wrestling and on the shows, to watch the television product, and a whole lot more, go to anarchy-wrestling.net. That's Anarchy Wrestling, the second and fourth Saturdays of every month in Cornelia, Georgia.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back on the Midnight Black Mass. My guest at this time is a former NWA World, United States, and Southern Tag Team Champion. He holds the Art Abrams Lifetime Achievement Award with the Cauliflower Alley Club. He was the first inductee into the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Hall of Fame, and for my money, one of the greatest announcers and professional wrestling trainers of all time. Please welcome the incomparable Les Thatcher to the program.
And I must owe you money after that, right? I mean, you're going to send me a bill. How you doing?
That's what I do. Doing great, sir. How are you?
Well, I'm good actually. Not bad for an old man on an early morning. So, no, honestly, I'm just recovering from 4 days of Fan Fest in Charlotte. I got like 15 hours sleep over the 4 days, but I wouldn't have missed it for the world. We had a great time and a great crew of kids, and it's a shame it's the last one.
That's what I've heard. Everyone's saying Greg Price was being begged by all of the people in attendance to please come back and do another one. Really hope so. There's actually a lot I want to talk about from Fan Fest as we move forward into the interview, so definitely get to that here in just a moment. I know you were involved with the training there, and they had some matches, and there was a scholarship given out, so lots of cool stuff going on there at Fan Fest, as there always is. Right now, though, the big thing I'm bringing on the folks today to talk about.
You're fading away.
Training class that you've got.
Talk into the microphone, Dan.
That's going to be September the 13th.
Yes. We are, Blue Ridge, Georgia. And that's it's my third venture there for Woody. He runs a great promotion. And that's a pretty community there. I enjoy going over there. Actually, this year, we're just doing the 1 day because the following day, on Sunday, I'm up in Knoxville, which we can talk about later, too, in the Southeastern Championship Wrestling reunion. But the training with Woody is always a lot of fun. As I understand it, we're going to have young wrestlers from like 5 states. And I believe he's setting up 2 rings. And there will be a show that we're going to train all day, starting at 9 a.m., we'll break for lunch, come back, and train probably up until about 4 o'clock. And I believe everybody that comes to the training will be involved in the show on Saturday night. And like I say, I believe we're going to be 2-ring battle royal on top of, whatever the other matches are. But it's always a pleasure to go there. I've worked with some great young athletes there over the last couple of years, too.
We had a great time when you came down to Cornelia, Georgia for the camp. And, of course, last week, myself and Kyle Matthews on this show spent a good amount of time talking about the various things we learned and got out of the experiences that we had with you there at the camp. But from the man, in his own words, why should up-and-coming wrestlers take their time and money to get this refining, to get this extra training from you?
Because you never stop learning. I'm 73 years old. I've been training people since 1992. I've been in the business since I just celebrated my 54th anniversary this past July the 4th. My first match 54 years ago in Blue Hills, Maine. But you never stop learning, and you can only teach what you yourself know. There are a lot of young people involved in the independent wrestling business that are training. But they can only teach what they themselves know, or they can only pass along experiences that they themselves have experienced. And that's where us old beat-up guys come in, I think. I've worked in the business at every level. I've been involved in broadcasting, been involved in television production, magazines, of course, wrestling, as you mentioned, the titles and the tags, and also worked as a single. So, the fundamentals of this business should never change. It's like a comparison. A movie that won an Academy Award in 1950 for drama, let's say, and a movie that wins it in 2014 for drama, the fundamentals are basically the same. The clothing's going to change, the verbiage will change, the type of automobile, that sort of thing, but the fundamentals are still the same, and that's the one thing that we worked on in Charlotte. It's the one thing I work on every year when I'm in Blue Ridge or any place else I go, is details. It's about facial expressions, body language, timing, how to tell a story. Young athletes should be just walking, talking books, and every book has a beginning and a middle and an end, and they should build toward that. If all you're doing is out there just doing high spot after high spot for no particular rhyme or reason, you're not giving the fans actually what they paid for, and you're certainly not progressing your own career, or for that matter, if you're looked at by a scout from one of the big organizations, they're not going to be impressed either. So it comes back. And when some kids say, well, I've been doing this 5 years, and I've been doing it this long, I feel safe in saying, Dan, that if you've been doing it 15 years at an independent level, give me 3 days of your time, 2 days of your time, a day of your time, and I can give you something that's going to, help you improve what you're doing.
And I will second that. I remember I was the booker of Anarchy Wrestling when we brought you down for the camp, and there were some guys in our locker room, you literally changed their entire approach to the business. And these were guys who were considered by their peers and respected wrestlers to be good hands, but you completely reshaped the way they thought about the business and made them that much better in the ring. And so I would implore you, any wrestler, young up-and-coming trainer, anybody that's involved in the business, you need to take your time to go and join this camp. It's only $25 for the day. You can get more info at dscwrestling@yahoo.com or their website at dscw.org. You definitely need to sign up. I know spots are going fast. Woody has definitely told me that. So make sure, fans, that you get your spot signed up in the Les Thatcher camp for DSCW.
And Woody also supplies lunch and bottled water for the day as well. So that's another plus for your $25.
Absolutely. So the training, of course, you're well known for that. You've worn just pretty much every hat in the business, and of course we want to talk just mainly shop. That's what we do here on the program. But I want to talk about just some of the history of what you're doing. You mentioned the Southeastern Championship Wrestling reunion you're going to upcoming in Knoxville. And I'm always fascinated by that period from your career. It was what, like 74 to 77 that you were in Southeastern?
Yes. Well, actually, I was 74 to 70. I was 79, and then spent less than a year down in the Gulf Coast with Ron Fuller and that extension of Southeastern Championship Wrestling came back to Knoxville when Jimmy Crockett Jr., Ric Flair, and Blackjack Mulligan bought the territory from Jim Barnett. And then they finally, closed the territory down, and I left there actually in '85. But yeah, I had a long run there. Well, even before that, Dan, when I first started wrestling for the Nashville office, Goulas Welch, in 1968, was my first appearance in Knoxville. At the time, there was no television there. John Kazana was promoter, and he happened to hook me up with a guy from the region, Whitey Caldwell, who was a tremendous little baby face and a heck of a guy. Anyway, the two of us were the first two baby faces over when John finally got television. When I first started going in there was no TV. It was talk about old school in terms of John promoting his shows for every Friday night. It was newspapers and posters, and radio. And that was the extent of it. But anyway, Whitey and I were the first two baby faces over in there when John got his TV. And Ron and Don Wright, not those of flying fame, but the Wright brothers were the first heels over. And we drew big there. We had a real red-hot feud. In fact, in Chilhowie Park, the amphitheater, we still hold the actual butts and seats attendance record. Now, there's been more money drawn there. Fuller drew more money. But in terms of number of people at one event in the amphitheater for wrestling, I think that record still stands.
That is incredible. It's interesting. My in-laws are from the Knoxville, Sevierville, Gatlinburg, that whole area up there. And Whitey Caldwell and Don Wright, and Ron Wright specifically, but Ron and Don, and you're still talked about by those people up there that remember it. Ron Wright was one of the most infamous heels in wrestling history, even if it was only in a small territory. Would you care to just share your experiences on someone who got that nuclear level of heat?
Wow. Yeah, he came across in his promos or his interviews, whatever you want, whatever the current terminology is, like a Baptist minister. He'd start raving on, and they'd stop and take that big, deep breath, and then he'd go again. Tremendous promo. Now, he was not a textbook professional wrestler. He was a meat chopper more than anything else, but he got over, and the brothers got over. To attest, Dan, to the fact that he had so much heat, if you were to ask him to lift the back of his shirt, you would see a scar that runs from the base of his neck to his waistline, 175 stitches, where a fan zippered him, I think it was in Greenville, Tennessee, a number of years ago. That's the kind of heat that the young heels today can't even fathom, and will probably never have, obviously because of the complexion of the business changing. But that's the kind of heat Ron Wright had. We a quick story about knives, heat, and Ron and Morristown, Tennessee. Whitey and I were working with the Wrights. There was no skirt around the ring, so you could, if you squatted down, you could see from one side of the ring to the other underneath. Anyway, we get into a four-way. Ron says, throw me out and follow me. So, I did. He shot under the ring, and I went in after him. Now, he had a roll of athletic tape, adhesive tape, in his tights, which I had no idea. But again, then as I would prefer now, we improvise. We called everything on the fly. Anyway, we have a little exchange of punches or whatever. He gets one up on me and takes the roll of tape out and starts to tape my neck to one of the ring supports. Now he's facing me. He's looking over my shoulder, and his eyes get big, and he says, "Oh my God!" And I'm thinking, what's going on? Because I'm limited to my movement, so I don't know what's happening behind me. But he starts. We're on our hands and knees. He starts backing out, still facing me, not turning around and going out, but backing out. Then in my peripheral vision, I see a fan coming up alongside me who has a knife out. He was coming after Ron Wright to protect me. And, of course, at this point, he sees he can't get to Ron. Ron's out on the other side and up back in the ring. And he turns to me and he said, "I'll get you loose." And I said, "I got it, baby. I got it." I was picturing him with that knife swinging at that tape around my neck, right? So, but that's the kind of heat these guys had everywhere in that region, Dan. I mean, it was, it was amazing. And of course, like I say, we drew well with the stories and angles that Whitey and I worked with the Wrights.
Yeah, that's just some classic stuff. And unfortunate that there's not that much footage of any of that era out there. It's very limited, but there's a little bit.
Yeah, there's not. You're right. There isn't much. And one of the things that I never knew. Now, we're talking about my time in Knoxville. I started broadcasting there with Southeastern in '74 and producing their show, and then came back with Cornette with Smoky Mountain. Produced and hosted through 3 different owners of Southeastern. But anyway, when I first took over, when Fuller first got it, when I was wrestling there as Whitey's partner, you're not paying much attention to television. You don't, the word format or segue or break or something is, it's just, hey, here's where you do your interview, and it's for 2 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever, and you went and did it. When I first came in for Fuller, we sat down to put together our very first TV. And he had given me carte blanche. He said, you understand television. I don't. Produce whatever you want. And so as not to go into detail, we put a lot of things out there for the first time on wrestling television that are commonplace today. But I said, okay, where are your formats? They don't have formats. Kazana and crew just winged it. I mean, he decided, I guess, Saturday morning when we did TV who was going to be on, and but there was never a run sheet or format as they call it. So my first job for Southeastern for Ron was to draw a rough sketch of a format and run out to the local copy shop and get some copies made so we had a format. We went into it was the ABC affiliate, Channel 26. On Saturday morning, and I asked who was the director, and I said, "Here are the formats," and he looked at me like I had 2 heads. He'd never done a format for wrestling, but that was and that kind of I think helped the resurgence of business there too, is because we did it more professionally, and as everything evolves, over the years, you look at some of the stuff that was done back then, it will look like, wow, they were cavemen and Neanderthals. But, like I say, everything evolves, and that's the way it evolved there. So, yeah, so I've got a long history there, beginning in 1968, wrestling there. And then finally, whenever Smokey finally closed their doors, what would that have been, 91?
95.
I don't know, 90, okay. Then that was the final, my final run in K-Town.
and what you did with the production there, you did briefly touch on it, but I just want to expound on it a little more because I think it does worth noting. You were revolutionary in many production aspects of wrestling television there, with the personality profile segments, having a screen there in the studio. I saw that you rigged up some mechanism where you had a foot pedal that you could rotate the screen to show recaps and things. Pretty far ahead of its time, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and it was, and a lot of stuff. Well, you mentioned personality profile. We pre-taped a 5-minute segment, which was inserted into the middle of the show, and it was low key. Now, once in a while, a heel would get crazy or a babyface would raise their voice, and we broadened the scope of it. But initially, it was just to make people aware of more about the wrestlers, which to me today is an important thing that's being overlooked as well. Because, if you just watch a wrestling match, so this guy's a heel, he's a babyface, he's tall, he's short, he's, got blonde hair, he's got no hair, whatever. But basically all you know about this person, what you see or what the announcers are telling you, which doesn't give you background. And one of the things that caught my eye years before and made me want to do this was my first run in Georgia in 1966. The first time I was at their TV, Leo Garibaldi was the booker at the time, and a person who shaped a lot of my philosophy and psychology in the wrestling business, said, we don't have, you're not working a hot angle or anything, but Ed Capral is going to interview you, and now your background in drag racing, that is a shoot, or is that, no, yeah, that's a shoot, because I was driving on drag strips before I had a driver's license. I was racing when I was 15 years old. Anyway, so Ed and I went on, and we talked about National Hot Rod Association racing in Georgia, the Platt brothers, Dino Don Nicholson, these are Pete Robinson, these are some names of some people from Georgia who were big in drag racing nationally. So anyway, those tapes are bicycled. I was in Augusta, Georgia, the following Monday, anyway, after this tape had run, and a lady came up and said, my grandson would love to meet you and get your autograph. Are you going to be here for a moment? I said, yes. It was after my match, and I was out watching the rest of the matches. Anyway, she brought the grandson back, and I signed his autograph book. And I said, do you come to Bell Auditorium, which was the building in Augusta, every Monday with your grandmother? And before he can answer, she said, this is the first time he's ever been here. He watches your show with me every Saturday, but he never, was interested in coming till he heard you talking about drag racing, which which he was fascinated about. And he wanted to come and talk to you about that. And the light bulb went off over my head, right? It's like I sold a ticket tonight to the matches, not necessarily because of my wrestling skills or anybody else's, but because this young man's hobby and my hobby were similar. Well, that's if you watch NASCAR, it's this Bush may but he drives a car like mine. We're Ford fans or we're Toyota fans or whoever. So and you identify more deeply with a person if you have something more than the surface thing that you're watching them perform. And that was my thought with wrestling. So a lot of the old timers said, no, it's not going to work. Can't do a low key sit down interview in the middle of the show. You'll kill your momentum, which we proved them wrong. And so it worked. Yeah, that was one of the big things. I think that we did a split screen with tag matches, which I don't see anymore. Because it's turned into more of a performance art now than actually building heat for that hot tag. But, we'd have one cameraman on the guy in the corner reaching for the tag, the other cameraman, following the babyface fighting for that corner with the heel trying to keep him back. We used special effects, like when we had Mephisto, we'd throw up special effects like fire in front of him. We had an animated opening for both Personality Profile and the show itself. I don't know that anyone had done that at the time, or maybe has done it again. I don't think anybody uses animation. But we just, tried to modernize it, and it was successful. We won NWA Best New Programming Award, and we got a lot of accolades for it. Like I say, a lot of the stuff that we did. Like the sit-down interview, we call it Personality Profile. Those are done today, and no one stops to think twice about them being done. But back then, they said it's not going to work. But it did.
Awesome. Yeah, that period just always fascinates me. Have you seen, or maybe this reunion is part of it, have any thoughts on the resurgence of Southeastern wrestling up there with Dave Marquez and Dr. Tom?
I have not seen it. I talked to Tom about it a little bit. It's. I hope they're successful with it. I know they've got a good slot on Fox, the local Fox station. Part of it is, Dan, and I haven't seen the program. I talked to Tom briefly about it when we were in Charlotte. We were so busy. Maybe at lunch we discussed it a little bit. But to me, here's the thing that modern promoters have to understand. What works in L.A. doesn't work in Knoxville. What works in Knoxville doesn't work in Portland. What works in doesn't work in Tampa necessarily. So you got to realize you've got a region here that is unique unto itself. I think if I were doing a TV, and I'm not, first of all, no offense to local talent, but local talent is used to death, right? You can see them at 2 or 3 different independent shows every week. So, you need to put fresh talent and maybe talent a step above your area stars on your television to give me a reason to watch that opposed to, just seeing them in the small house shows. So I hope they're successful. There's not been anything like that, well, since Smokey closed their doors. So I'm always, if a regional television is done well and it works, I think it's a benefit to you, to your independent promotion. But if it's just thrown together, and throwing on there, as you and I both have seen, like on some of the public access stations and stuff, it's more like the guys entertain themselves, right? And which financially is no value to the performers or to the promotion.
No, not at all. But now I have heard that, I haven't seen it myself either, but, from the wrestlers and the talent and the fans up there, that seems to have gotten a favorable response. So that's good. I think there's just a fostered culture over the last 5 or 10 years of independent guys really trying to step their game up. I've been plugging away in the indies for about 15 years now. There certainly was a period where guys just didn't want to learn. They didn't want to seek out knowledge, it seemed. And it seems like with the popularity of just seminars like yourself and other veterans like Harley Race and other people that have been around doing these things, I'm really excited to see young guys eager to learn, which seems to be a new thing and really shouldn't be.
Yeah, you're right. And I think part of the difference, too, is when I was one of those young guys over a half century ago, you had veterans in that locker room. There weren't just a bunch of young guys. So these veterans, without saying so, were the policemen to a certain degree, if you didn't have respect, they taught it to you. If you didn't understand professionalism, they taught it to you. And you learn respect from them the easy way or the hard way, And of course, part of the independent scene is, as we both know, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but it's the blind leading the blind, If you and I don't know what the pursuit might be. If we're trying to, say you and I are trying to sell Amway, and we've never sold Amway, and we're out there just flying blind together, we could be making 50 mistakes a day, but neither one of us know that, and it's the same way with young guys. Well, I watch a lot of tapes, which is the common storyline, right? I watch a lot of tapes, so I've learned. My answer to that is I've been watching doctor shows on TV since Ben Casey in the 50s. Will you allow me to perform surgery on you? And they look at me like I'm nuts, right? And I am in that respect. But watching wrestling doesn't make you can't become a wrestler watching it. As you know, it's you get in that ring. Well, to give you an example, again back with the Charlotte thing, we had 2 observers that actually paid to come in and sit through the Q&A and the morning training sessions and the whole thing. Both these people came to me, and I'm sure the other trainers as well, at the end of the run there, the 4 days, and said, I will never watch wrestling again in the same manner. Things that they just took for granted, they came to find out how hard those things were come by, the little technical nuances, facials and body language they're realizing, wow, and the young people too. Now you're mentioning more young people wanting to learn, and I was, totally overwhelmed, impressed, whatever, with the crew. We had 44 young people, female and male, in Charlotte. One from Edinburgh, Scotland, one from England, and several from Western Canada. Now, you know that these people are spending their money to come there to be bounced around and critiqued and have their game taken apart and put back together. They're serious about what they're doing, and immediately you have to give them respect for no other reason, no matter what their talent level or if they have any talent. The fact that they traveled so far and spent so much, to actually learn. So you're right. With the kids that want to learn, man, I'll give them all the time in the world. But you've seen these guys. Hey, I've been doing this 15 minutes. I know. What is there you can teach me? Well, and the thought for most of the guys my age is, if I were a little younger, I could think of several things I could probably teach you in about 2 minutes. And when you got done screaming, then you would understand what we're talking about. But, that's, to me, that's important too, Dan, is to respect the industry. I know one of the things that, for those who don't know, the 4-day training session in Charlotte, the trainers were Dr. Tom Pritchard, myself, Lance Storm, Nigel McGuinness, and Jerry Briscoe, who is a scout under contract to WWE, floating in and out over that period of time. So you had all these different perspectives, 3 generations basically of trainers, but all on the same page in terms of the final outcome of how this business should, how you should learn it, and how it should be perceived by a performer. And I know if anybody walked away and said I didn't learn a thing, it was because they had cotton in their ears and their eyes closed. I mean, it just would have been impossible not to have picked it. Plus, for those, we had some special, we called them run-ins. Tully Blanchard came in and spoke to the group. Kevin Sullivan, Dusty Rhodes, of course, Briscoe spoke, and Lanny Poffo, Joe Malenko, Dean's brother. And so, they had access to all these people as well. So it was an amazing time, I thought. And hopefully, I know all the trainers said the same thing. Greg, if you're planning on at the least idea of doing it again, we want to do it with you. It was, I think we were all just had a great time and feel that we were productive with the young athletes that were there.
Yeah, that's a credit to the industry, in my opinion. I mean, what a lineup of people to work with or learn from. Young guys, you'd never have that chance on an independent show anywhere to work with that level of talent or experience. So I heard you give away a scholarship there from one of the trainees. It was a young lady named Jessie Kay from Maryland. What impressed you so much about her?
Well, first of all, she had dumped 60 pounds to get in the business. You've been around me when I've done these camps. I stress conditioning. It's a visual business. So, regardless of, I don't like to go to the gym, or I don't like to, if you're going to be in the business and try to make it at a high level, then you need to present the package that is currently popular. Anyway, Jessie dumped 60 pounds. That in alone, it was impressive. Through all the training, you can see how hard she was working. She pushed herself, as did a lot of the athletes. When it came down to the final voting, that was on Sunday. We were all, it's kind of like if you're calling a horse race, they're around the last turn and headed down the home stretch, and they're running in a pack. There was Jessie and 3 or 4 other guys that were involved that, could be any one of these. So what we did is the trainers in a secret ballot ranked their 1, 2, and 3 picks, and then 1 got 3 points, 2 got 2, obviously, and third pick got 1. And that's how Jessie ended up with it. But I think the thing that swayed everybody is on Saturday. There was 2 shows, one Saturday night, one Sunday afternoon. And by the way, on the Saturday show, the kids from the camp just excelled. Chase Owens, who is the NWA Junior Heavyweight Champion, and Red Titus, who is under contract to Ring of Honor, and to talk about admiring guys who are already, you know, at a little higher level than everybody else on that was there, still wanting to learn more and showing up and busting their hump. These two guys had match of the night on Saturday night, without a doubt. But Jesse worked with Kong, Amazing Kong.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wasn't in the back, didn't know. All I'm knowing is what I'm watching from the broadcast table where I'm doing color. And had they have come out, and because of Kong's high profile, and you know she's worked with WWE and TNA, and has been big on the independents, Shimmer, and so forth. And the size difference, if the match had gone 2 minutes and she'd have snuffed Jesse, I said, okay, you know, I understand. They went 7 or 8 minutes. She sold for Jesse, and the best thing, Dan, I think, was the fact that was Jesse nervous? I'm sure she was, but you didn't see that, which is also, obviously, as you know, an attribute, a plus. She went out there and she performed as a professional, and they had a heck of a match, and I think every one of the trainers that watched were, wow, you know, we were all impressed. Then on Sunday, the last thing we did with the kids before we broke for lunch, it ended up us getting the trainers getting together and make our decision. Everybody has 1 minute to cut a promo, and you make it. You know, you do whatever. Now there were some, you know, some of the kids were very good. Some were, you know, were marginal, and obviously some, you know, didn't have a clue. But with Jessie, she stepped up there and did her minute. And as I told Gerald Briscoe, I said, right now, she is a better promo than any diva on the WWE roster, and she was. So wow. I think, yeah, the Saturday night and the Sunday, and you know, plus the rest of the week, just kind of sealed it for her, you know. And so, you know, she's. I've received an email from her just the other day with asking me to suggest. She has family in Charlotte. And I had said to her, you know, she's planning on moving. She lives in Maryland. She's planning on moving. She wants to work with better trainers. And Tessa Blanchard, who was part of the camp, Tully's daughter, lives in Charlotte and trains with George South. And, you know, so she's talked about maybe going there to increase her training and work with George some. And I said, absolutely. I do recommend that. And, you know, if you do, feel free to use me as a recommendation and tell him I sent you. So she's... You know, she's going to take this and run with it. And to me, that's the good thing. You know, if you give it to somebody and you don't see them trying to excel and you know, improve their stance in the business, then you know they've wasted their time, and you've obviously wasted yours as well. But she's already making plans, you know, to. And of course, for those who don't know, this $2,500 scholarship, Reed Fleur scholarship. Greg Price controls that. It's not like he's going to hand somebody $2,500 and then go out and have a hell of a party. When she's ready to order a pair of boots, as we all know, which are $350, $350, those boots will be paid for from this scholarship fund. For example, Harley Race does a week-long camp for prospects for Noah in Japan. If she were to want to go there, I believe that's $500. There's, you know, $500 comes out. So the $2,500 will be spent on gear, training seminars, you know, anything that she needs, you know, to improve her stance in the wrestling community.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a fantastic idea, too, with the scholarship. I really love that. And so keep your eye on Jessie K, folks. Could be hearing a lot about her coming up in the future if our legends are any indicator, and they usually are. So we talked about the Fan Fest. One other notable item, and I know you're tight with this individual, and I just wanted to check on him, really. I know that Harley Race was scheduled. They had his documentary, had Caleb Conley on here a few weeks ago who was involved in the production of that, talking about how excited they were to let Harley watch his documentary, and, of course, he had a fall and didn't get to make it out to the Fan Fest. Have you heard about his condition? Have you talked to him lately?
Well, from the best I can tell, no, I have not, and I should have called him. He had, this past Monday, coming off of that fall, they did some sort of surgery on his spine. Now, he already had one hip replacement. What we heard, he'd fallen on the other hip, and there was speculation he may have broken that. Harley's had 5 or 6 back surgeries already. And the fact that, you know, he fell and got in the vehicle and started towards Charlotte anyway. And after, I don't know, 35 or 40 miles, I was told the pain was so excruciating that he turned around and went back and realized he couldn't make it. If the Harley race that I know, the pain had to be hell. I mean, it really did, because he lives with a certain amount of pain all the time. So again, I need to call him. My wife is she's in rehab from a complete knee replacement, so that's been a center of my attention basically when it's not wrestling. But
Sure.
Harley, we missed him. I wanted to see him too, because as you know, he and I have done training camps along with Ricky Steamboat. The three of us did camps together, and we wrote a training manual, the Professional Wrestlers Workout and Instructional Guide. But Harley, he's a tough son of a gun, and I can only hope that whatever the surgery was with the spine is going to, he's needed, he used the electric cart some and a walker, and it seemed like every time they decided to do back surgery, they were going to tell, well, this is going to relieve the pain or you'll be able to walk straighter, and it has not been the case. But for young people listening to you and I, one of the things Harley would tell you himself, because he's mentioned this to me a couple times, is if he could run the clock back, one of the things he would stop doing immediately is to dive off the top with a headbutt, because he feels that was part of the thing that began the process of his back deteriorating.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, Harley Race, just legendarily one of the toughest guys in the history of the sport. He overcame polio as a child. He was well renowned as a guy you did not want to fuck with. And, we wish him all the best here at the program and hope that he makes a speedy recovery. He's just one of the all-time great and most respected figures in the history of the business.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, while we're talking about that, a recent passing of a man who wrestled a lot in your area, a man who was a dear friend of mine, Kenny Lucas, just passed away a few days ago.
Yeah.
And what an amazing worker he was. Ric Flair mentions Lucas in his book, saying that through all his title runs, Lucas was one of the men that he enjoyed the most working with. And I had the pleasure of not only wrestling Kenny when he was a heel, but being his tag team partner. In fact, there in the Tennessee area, I worked several six-mans in the Choo Choo City with Luke and Dennis Hall, who was my tag team partner for a long time, has also left us earlier this year. Luke was an amazing hand and a great sense of humor. You could do a whole show about Kenny Lucas ribs, but we won't. But it's with our generation, we were on the, I noticed it in Charlotte. Bill Eadie, Mass Superstar, brought it up. He said, when you come to these things, the guys from our generation may have not have seen each other for 20 years, but immediately it's like we just saw each other yesterday. And I think a lot of that was we worked every night. We were on the road together, locker rooms together, in the cars together. And as we were mentioning about the Ron Wright knifing earlier, we're figured to cover each other's backs when it was necessary. So there was a stronger bond, I think. So, I think when people like Kenny pass, Harley has an accident, things like that, I think the guys, those of us who were close to those people, I think we lose a little bit of ourselves in that as well. And, like I say, I love Kenny to death as a friend, as a performer, and just want to send my best out to his family. And, I'm sure he and Dennis Hall are ribbing somebody up there already together.
I'm sure. And thanks so much for those reflections. That's the kind of thing that our audience really loves, and just a heartfelt look back at a guy who many consider to be one of the great unsung heroes of wrestling. He didn't become a WWE superstar, he wasn't a top draw on national TV, but when you ask wrestlers who a wrestler's wrestler was, Kenny Lucas always comes up. So rest in peace,
yes,
man. Sir, we're running out of time. We've got about 4 minutes left. Definitely want to save a couple of minutes here at the end for the plugs and where they can find you and all that good stuff. But I had one just kind of off-the-wall question. We were talking about the Tennessee wrestling. This is something that I was pondering. It's always kind of bothered me. Guys like Ole and some of the more hardcore Mid-Atlantic guys always referred to Tennessee wrestling as bullshit. You know, it's all just bullshit Tennessee wrestling. There were like some real legitimate workers, you know, like Lawler and Dundee, legitimate tough guys like Don and Al Green and Gypsy Joe and the various others. What gave it that reputation? Do you think it's just solely based on the shady tactics of Nick Goulas? I mean, you were there.
Yeah, I think more so because you're right. You know, there were some goofy angles. You know, real quick, when we started at Knoxville, when I started producing Fuller's TV, Jerry Jarrett came over and helped out. Now, Jerry and I have a great relationship. If you've read his book where he says that Luke and Dennis Hall and I left because he was the booker, well, that we don't have the time for me to tell that story, but that was not the reason I left the Tennessee territory. But anyway, they were doing some crazy stuff over in Memphis that Ron Fuller and I didn't want. Knoxville, you know. There were serious, and Ole talking about that. Well, when Barnett bought the Knoxville territory, Ole worked there, so Ole's talking about himself. But yeah, I think it's more about, you know, the Goulas thing, and they'd throw a mask on anybody. You know, you could have been Red Raider number 42, Dan, if you happen to walk in at the right time, right? And I mean, they could have the Red Raiders in the same town every week, and there was a chance that it weren't the same two guys every week, you know. I mean, it was just, it was more frivolous. I think it wasn't as thought out, and they did some crazier things, I suppose. But, yeah, some great workers there. The Fargos, Len Rossi, you know, and you mentioned Ricky Morton, you know, Luke, you know, mentored Morton and Bobby Eaton for that matter. So, yeah, you know, it was a reputation that, you know, I could see why, you know, at points, but it didn't necessarily, wasn't blanket coverage is my point, I guess, you know, because you're right. There were a lot. And in the Knoxville end, when we started with Southeastern, the whole idea was cell wrestling. You know, Danny Hodge and I had a contenders match when Ken Mantell was the world junior heavyweight champion. We had some great workers who were pretty solid wrestlers. I mean, shooters, Tony Charles, John Foley, guys like Nelson Royal, guys like that who worked the territory, Jody Hamilton, the assassin, Rock Hunter. I mean, these guys weren't clowns, you know, and that was the image that we tried to project and promote for Southeastern wrestling, and ultimately Smokey was the same way. So, yeah, it was, you know, just one of them things. Tennessee wrestling bullshit. Okay, whatever.
All right, well, Fred, that's going to wrap it up with Les. We're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. You can find Les there's LesThatcher.com and EPWT.com, and if you want to book him for a seminar, email him at les@EPWT.com.
Yes.
And we lost Les there, unfortunately. The time ran out, and what an amazing interview. I cannot thank him enough for taking the time to spend with us this week and really giving us a pro wrestling lesson, as it always is when you talk to the incomparable Les Thatcher. I just wanted to close out the episode properly since we were chit-chatting there, and I could have sat there and talked to him all day long, but the compound has a giant yard, and I had to get out there and mow it. But it was the perfect morning. Usually I conduct my interviews late at night. This is the Midnight Black Mass, so I like to give the ambience. Les was not so cool with doing it that late, and that was fine by me. He's my guest. I wanted to accommodate him. So we did it early in the morning. On Saturday, we recorded that interview, and not many better ways to spend a Saturday morning than sitting around drinking a cup of coffee and talking wrestling with the legendary Les Thatcher. One of the best interviews I think we've ever had here on the Midnight Black Mass. And the good news is he's agreed to come back on the program. So that's going to be happening down the line, because there was a list of questions I had a mile long for him, of course, and I got about halfway through it. There were things we didn't even talk about, like current superstars that he's trained. One of the hottest guys in wrestling right now, Dean Ambrose, came right out of the Heartland camp for Les Thatcher. One of his students announcing. He announced with every great announcer. I'm not sure that he ever shared a booth with Lance Russell. That was one question I wanted to ask him about. But otherwise, he called matches with Bob Caudle, Gordon Soley, and Jim Ross all at various points in his career. Just so much more still yet to talk to Les Thatcher about. So that's going to wrap it up for the show this week. I just wanted to get one more plug in for Les's training seminar that he is going to be doing coming up at Deep Southern Championship Wrestling. That is going to be in September, on September the 13th. That's a Saturday. It's from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Cost is $25. That's at 787 Summit Street, Blue Ridge, Georgia. Lunch and bottled water are provided, and there will be a show that night that is part of the clinic. For more information, you can contact Deep Southern Championship Wrestling at 706-633-4396 or dscwrestling at yahoo.com. And folks, that's going to do it. I'm getting out of here and going to get on the phone and try to line up my guests for next week. Got a few in mind, so if you're on my friends list, you're playing the lethal lottery and your number might get called. Until next time, I'm the Reverend. Keep one foot in the gutter and one fist in the gold with two horns in the air. I'm out.
Thank you.